Hi everyone, Autumn here. I come to you as a life coach and as somebody who endured a relationship with a narcissist. Talking about, I understand both personally and professionally, the enormous impact that a narcissist or somebody with cluster B personality disorders, any of the sociopathy, psychopathy, borderline, and the abuse that they inflict on the people around them. And today I'm going to talk about I'm going to do a couple of podcasts and videos on when the mask starts to slip and looking for the traits of narcissists and these types of people that suffer from or who are sociopaths, psychopaths in the clinical sense. You know, they all use a mask in order to draw you in. And if you have been researching this for a while or are familiar with it, or if you just recently are starting to look at your previous relationship or your current one, that intuition in you has started to tell you something is wrong, you'll know as you look back, and you'll see as you look back, that these people use different masks in order to project the persona that they think they need to in order to get what they want. All of us that have been victims of narcissistic abuse understand that we were manipulated because the beginning of the relationship was nothing like the eventual outcome of the relationship when you look back. These people target people like us who are empaths, people who are forgiving, kind, compassionate, will put other people first, are people pleasers. Possibly some of us either situationally codependent or have always been codependent. And they target people like that, like us, because we're the people that are going to look past all of the faults that they may have. We're the people that are going to be most able to manipulate. So when you look at the way they wear these masks, it's always obviously to garner some type of attention or some type of manipulative stronghold on the other person. So I look back with my ex-husband, who was a narcissist, and I see all these different masks that he wore at the time. He would wear one mask or be one person when he was in public in front of strangers or during sex, or all these different masks he would use. Because remember, one of the things to remember about the cluster B personality people is that they are never themselves. And what I mean by that is that there's this core person that they really are. We all have this integrated person, normal, healthy people, quote unquote, that aren't personality disordered. We reconcile, and we have a cohesive sense of self and personality that intertwines all different parts of us, all of our different emotions, all of our experiences in the past. And the person that we portray when we go out, for the most part, into the world and interact with people is either an extension of that real sense of self or is our real self. And what I mean by that, the extension, everybody may change according to the environment and according to the social norms of that environment and the people within it. That's natural, and actually that's pretty healthy when you are able to be adaptive. But that's not what I'm talking about with disordered people, narcissists. They actually conform to a whole nother person, because remember, their true self is hidden and buried really deep down. It's really about a 5-year-old developmentally. And the person that you see and they project into the world and in their relationships is a false self. That false self is somebody that they have started projecting when they were very young, because the true self they hate so much, especially covert narcissists in particular. They truly, secretly hate that person so much, the true self. They don't feel confident. They feel, and that's not to say, because I hate it when people say with narcissists that they are deeply insecure deep down. Yeah, maybe, but they're not even aware of it usually. They're so out of touch. They've turned off all of their real emotions, either because of trauma or abuse in their past, or because they were just born that way, because their brain, if they're just born that way, then there is no real self, So there's this false self that they project into the world, and that's these masks that they wear. The false self helps protect them. It allows them to be a chameleon and change according to the situation and the person, to mirror other people, to make people feel comfortable and to trust them so that they can get what they want out of them. And that mask is the illusion that the emotional manipulator wants the world to perceive. It's often consciously constructed, but the basis of the need for it is subconscious, which is that projection of the false self. So they may consciously construct it, meaning they actually understand consciously, I'm going to do this and this and this. I'm going to be this type of person. They may actually consciously construct it, but the subconscious need for it, that projection of the false self, they're not even aware of. And that's why with these disorders, there's no cure. And even with therapies that are supposedly like DBT, that are supposedly work with them, it doesn't really work. The motivation to want to change has to be there. And when part of the disorder is that they don't think there's anything wrong with them because they're so blind to their true self, and they only are aware of their false self, that they constantly change, there's really no hope. And I want to reiterate that. I'm going to talk about that in another podcast or video, because I've recently started to work with victims, people who have endured this type of abuse, and women in particular. And this happens to men too, and I have male clients as well, don't get me wrong. Borderline females are notoriously horrible and abusive on so many levels. But I've started, just because that's how it kind of has worked out, started to work with women with a team that I have for my practice. One is an MD, a doctor. The other person is a nurse practitioner, works with diet, exercise, and cosmetic med spa type of things. I work with the emotional part of it, with my psychology background as a life coach. And what we started to do is work with women that are leaving relationships, and not always abusive ones, but leaving relationships and starting over and reclaiming themselves and redefining themselves and becoming the person that they want to be. And that's what we've worked with them integratively, right? Not just within therapy, not just within looking at the past and analyzing emotions, but also working on diet, exercise, having the body that reflects the person they really are, having health, homeopathy, and alternative health practices as well. Okay, so I digress. Going back to these masks, emotional manipulators, which is what I call anybody in that cluster B personality, sociopaths, psychopaths, narcissists. One of the common things that they may say, and to look out for, is when you're involved with somebody who's making comments in the moment, and especially in moments of your vulnerability. And what they'll do is they'll mirror, or they'll create a false sense of vulnerability or empathy that is so believable that you believe it. And you start to have a lot of empathy for them, because they will have a sob story. They will talk about their childhood abuse. They will either make it up or exaggerate it. Excuse me. And they do this for a specific agenda. One of the best ways to get somebody to trust you, to open up to you, and show you their weaknesses. And once you get someone's weaknesses, well, then you can control them, basically. And they'll trust you. And so this is one manipulative technique that a lot of emotional manipulators, narcissists, use all the time. My ex-husband, who was a clinically diagnosed with NPD and BPD comorbid, which I found out much later, obviously, after being married, he would play up, particularly with me, his abuse from his childhood, all different sorts of abuse. Now, do I think that it was a total lie? No, but I think a lot of it was made up. Some of it was exaggerated. And I think a lot of it I know a lot of it was used, and this is what they'll do, it was used to create a sense of trust and as a flat out excuse for bad behavior. It was an excuse, like if he didn't want to, have sex, if he didn't want to, if he was denying me intimacy as a form of control and manipulation of the relationship. And again, he was a covert narcissist and very cerebral, so sex to him was very odd and he didn't like it, and it was only for power. And I'll talk about that in another video. I think that's so important. But again, so emotional manipulators will use this garnering of attention and depth of these stories, sob stories, how horrible their ex-wife was, how bad their kids may treat them, or my ex didn't have kids or an ex-wife, but how bad their mother treated them, how abused they were as children, and this gives them the ability to open up, get you to open up, then you start to trust them more and than they would normally, and then you have this kind of recipe for being able to for them to be able to manipulate you. And they'll say things like, if you really knew me, you wouldn't love me. I know my ex-husband said this a lot. He said, if you really knew me, you wouldn't love me. There were times of vulnerability when he would say this. And I always looked at it, this poor boy, this poor man who was abused, he has such a fragile sense of self. But really what he was saying was he was telling me, and I see it very clearly now, he was telling me that there is this true self in him that I don't know. And it's evil and wicked and maniacal, and it is hateful and rageful and not kind, and it's not the person, the false persona he has shown me to be. So a lot of time emotional manipulators, narcissists, will say things like that. Say things like, you can't really love me because you don't really know me. Kind of this whole, again, it's garnering attention and sympathy, but these are when the mask starts to slip. You'll see cracks. You'll see little signs. Now that you've been through it, if you've already been through it, you'll start to see it in other people, in other situations. It'd be like, whoa. But before, it's almost to that point where you can't even imagine, right? If you know what I'm talking about. Before you went through narcissistic abuse or abuse by an emotional manipulator, if somebody tried to explain it to you, it would seem bizarre and made up and not real. Even with my background professionally and having encountered a lot of messed up people in my personal life and dealt with a lot of people professionally, I mean, I would never have believed in a person being able to manipulate and hurt this much as my ex-husband did. And as I see other people's narcissists in their life, due to them and the people in their life. So what they're doing is that they're subconsciously aware of this false sense of self, and it's coming out in these kind of statements, and they're projecting it, and it's probably the closest that they will ever come to self-awareness of this false self, and that they even have this other self deep down. Emotional manipulators, narcissists have impulse control problems. These impulses of rage, of violence, and even psychopaths and violent or malignant, violent narcissists that murder people, that kill people, that beat up people randomly, that do these impulsive things where the deep down rage and anger they have, the mask flies off, and suddenly you see the monster beneath, the real monster within. I remember the first time I saw my ex-husband's monster, it was frightening. I saw my ex-husband as this calm, in control, loving, blah, blah, blah man. I used to tell people, he's the most emotionally intelligent man I've ever met. I actually believed that because he projected that. He knew that was important to me. So he mirrored that to me to hook me in. And he was so cognitive of how he manipulated that he really was emotionally intelligent on the surface. And now, once I started seeing the cracks come through and the mask slip off, it was the most alarming thing I'd ever seen in my life. I truly thought he was someone else. And the first time I saw it happen, I'll never forget it. It was maybe a month after we got married, not even. And he flew into this rage over virtually nothing. We had had sex, and he had just gotten up to leave without a word. And the rage, the evil that came out, I mean, his face contoured. He became somebody else. I had never seen this in my life. And look, my dad was, a yeller when I was younger. On occasion, would get very angry. Not often, but sometimes. I've been around my ex-business partner, had bipolar. I would have just the most crazy mood swings. But this was something else entirely. Looking into the eyes and seeing the face of a sociopath or a narcissist is like looking into a spawn of the devil. I mean, I hate to say it so dramatically, but you know what I'm talking about if you've been through this or you've been in a relationship and seen narcissistic rage. It's incredible. I mean, it really, truly is incredible. So when they don't get what they want, oftentimes that's when this rage will come out. If they feel as though people want too much from them, i.e., people want anything from them, this rage will come out. If they feel one big thing, if any kind of narcissistic injury, ego injury, any kind of criticism, even if you give them a wrong look that they interpret as you criticizing them or putting them down, or you sigh. I mean, there was one time where I sighed in the middle of a conversation that my ex interpreted basically as I was manipulative and I was hurting him and criticizing him. He flew into a rage. And remember, when they fly into rages, they're grasping for straws. It's like a man sinking almost. They really are. They could almost kill themselves with their rage and their anger. And it's as though they're drowning in this rage and anger that they cannot control, and they're just grasping. Their fingernails are just grasping against you, trying to not drown and drag you down into the depths of the ocean hell with them. And so all these things will come out. The truth will come out. And so one of my big recommendations, if you're in a relationship, which I recommend you get out, but if you are still in one, with somebody who is a narcissist or emotional manipulator, or in the future, if you see these signs, pay close attention, observe, don't get caught up emotionally. It was very hard for me not to do. Often I couldn't not do it. It wasn't until I started becoming more aware that I slowly was able to remove myself and be an observer looking down. Observe what they say. Observe all the little things that come out, because this is when the mask is gone, because they can't control it. The impulse control is so low that when they fly into rages of anger and or violence and or screaming, whatever it is, this is when you'll find all the truth bubbling to the surface. One thing that I would do, of course, I don't recommend, I'm not saying to do this in a legal sense, to use against them. That's not what I'm saying. But in a personal sense, one thing that you could do, which I started doing, was I secretly recorded these moments. And I did so in order to, me look back on it later and try to be more objective once I was out of it emotionally to see what was really going on. Another reason I did it was because I wanted to see if I missed any truths that came out, and often I did. I would replay it in a moment by myself and listen to it and realize, holy crap, there were so many things that came out that were truths. This was the real him. Actually, by recording, I started off recording these rages and crazy moments with him with my iPhone secretly, because I did not even believe myself when I looked back at it. I knew he was crazy. I knew I wasn't wrong. I knew I wasn't to blame. But he would manipulate it so much that I believed I was. I believed it was all my fault. And he, I drove him to do this, and I believed. So that's how it started. I only did it for that reason, so I could look back and try to figure out where I was wrong. I'm not kidding. That's how manipulated I was. And I had some awareness of this stuff. I was so manipulated that I would record it, not to see where he was wrong. This is how it started off, to see where I was wrong. Wow, I look back, and that was the turning point for me. Because when I did that, at first I would find my faults and say, okay, I can do this different. Maybe I was to blame. But slowly I started listening objectively in a moment of quiet and calm by myself, and I would see the enormous manipulation and uncalled for and unacceptable behavior by him. And that's really when I started to wake up. I had played it for my therapist, a couple of them, and my friends, and gotten insight, and it was just a slap in the face to realize, wow. And I kept recording them because legally I thought maybe I would need them. I don't even know that I can use them, but I wanted to have that kind of record in my mind so that I could also pick apart any truths that came out. The way he truly felt about me. When your narcissist or emotional manipulator rages, this is when you're going to get the truth. So I think it's very important for us to remain vigilant. All right, that's enough for today. I will talk to everyone soon. Hope you have a great day, and check out all my other videos on narcissism and abuse and recovery. And God bless.